Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever and whenever you happy watching this is Going Tokyo, coming at you with some more empty room reviews. And this time, as soon as we get the TV up here, we're going to be taking a look at... hold on a second, that channel's wrong. Gotta get the channel changed. We're taking a look at Jumping Flash, A Tale of Baron Aloha's Great Funky Mission. And what is that? Well, it's a game, developed by Exact, who handled the game engine and play, and Ultra, who handled the story and cutscenes, published by Sony Computer Entertainment, with a release of April 28th, 1995 on the PS1, although we played it on the PS4, and it's the story of a rabbit named Robbit, who's a robot and is attempting to save chunks of the planet that have been stolen by the evil Baron Aloha, who is an astrophysicist. They're very specific about that in everything I read about the game. He's an evil astrophysicist. He's grabbed these chunks of the planet to make his own resort with the help of his moo friends? Hench things? Minions? I'm not entirely sure what their relationship is with him, but that's not super important, because what is super important is that this is the first 3D platformer of its kind, which is super cool. It's a first-person platformer, so it's like well predating Metroid Prime. It's got the same kind of vibe to it, but much cooler, if you ask me. Just if you ask me. And it is a really cool, fun game that surprisingly holds up really well. The gameplay is... Now, first off, right off the bat, not particularly difficult. You're not going to struggle with this one. There are a few spikes here and there with a couple of bosses that we'll talk about, also with the bonus rounds, which we'll also talk about, but for the most part it's really not a difficult game at all. I think anybody could probably play this pretty well, even if you're not used to the control schemes of that time, which I had largely forgotten about because it's been ages since I've played. And one thing that you'll notice if you had watched our VODs, and you will hear me complain vociferously and often about how I wish you could look up and down, because you can't, and I was really frustrated with that. Well, actually you can do that. You totally can do that. It makes everything so much easier. And see, the thing is that this game came with a manual when it first came out, but now that it's digital, there ain't no manual. But Ultra and Exact, they were thinking of us, because if you leave it on the start screen for just a little while, it'll show you the controls. It'll do a little bit of gameplay for you. See, I didn't pay attention to that when I was streaming, so I completely missed out on the detail. Yes, you can totally look up. It's like dogs. Robbit can look up, but the gameplay, as I was saying, it's not particularly difficult. You're just running around these maps. You fight pretty simple enemies. You're looking for the 4 exit pods that will let you get on the gate and move on to the next stage. And then when you do 2 stages of platforming, and there will be a 3rd stage with the boss, and then you'll move on to the next world. There's 6 worlds in total. It's relatively short. I played it, I'd have to actually add it up in the pips, in the B-roll footage that I recorded, but I think you could probably do this without even really rushing or trying to speedrun it. You could do it in maybe about an hour and a half max. It's a pretty short game, and it's just really easy to jump into. There, appropriately enough for the name, I suppose. There is a level select, and once you've beaten it once, so you can go to wherever it is that you would like to focus on. I found the boss fights to be pretty enjoyable for the most part. I did say there was a few spikes on those bosses, and really you don't see them start to get difficult until about the 4th one, the Terrapin boss, because it's got these rockets that will track you, and they're kind of a pain in the ass. It spins around a lot. The 5th boss is super cool. It's a transformer. I fucking loved it, but it also has those rocket attacks. But interestingly enough, you can bounce off of the cubes when it breaks up into the cubes doing the transform, and you get like way up high above it and just stay out of the range of its attacks almost the entire time. It's super great. The 6th world has 2 bosses actually. It's only got 1 stage of platforming, a kind of tricky stage of platforming, but a really fun one where you're over space basically, and you've got this kind of space station bits going on there. There's a lot of jumping going on in there. I love it. But you do fight your shadow form in the 2nd stage, and then you'll fight Baron Aloha in the 3rd stage, and they were both slight difficulty jumps. But one thing that I really liked about this, and something that I struggle with in more modern games, that you can really sit back and learn the patterns of these bosses and actually improve at them, or at least I can. And when I played it on stream, and I really struggled against the shadow boss in particular. And side note, if you die, you've got to go back to the first stage of the world. Like, you can continue, that's great, but you're gonna have to do all the stages up to that point, and it does kind of tack on extra time. It's not a really big deal, and you're probably not going to be dying too much, but as I was saying, I did struggle against that boss. But when I forced myself to calm down a little bit and actually, like, look at what the boss was doing, pay attention to its attack patterns, and I wasn't easy when I finally beat him, but I did feel like I had learned what I was doing, and I felt very similar fighting Baron Aloha's boss as well. Baron Aloha's boss is weird, and there's an energy shot that he does that's a little bit of a pain in the ass to get out of the way of. Triple form on that boss, but it's a pretty fun, goofy boss, and I really enjoyed fighting him. Now, I did mention one other slight difficulty spike, although it is in the bonus stages, so it's not really going to affect your gameplay overall unless you're hunting for trophies, but the time limit on the bonus stages is really tight. And particularly for the later ones, you can't really fuck around that much. You will run out of time, but they're just for points. It's not unlocking any extra content if you clear them or don't clear them. You're not, like, gatekeeping yourself out of something. So, like, your mileage may vary, but yeah, very simple game, not particularly difficult, and super enjoyable. Now, the story is, it's an excuse plot, basically. Like, it doesn't really have any major overarching themes, I wouldn't say. I mean, you could dig into it, you could do some pretty aggressive reads on this, but, like, I don't really think it's supported in the text, and that's okay. It's very clear they wanted you just to be getting into the game, having a good time with it. The story ties things together. It's cute and it's enjoyable, but, like, it's not really what you're here for. I do need to point out, I think this is maybe a place for it. When we were streaming, and I kind of not really complained, but we did talk a little bit about, like, the Hitler factor, and if Baron Aloha was supposed to be a Hitler, and playing it on my own and taking a closer look at the model, he doesn't have the Hitler mustache. It's just, like, the shadow of his nose. So, how many elements do you need to transform from an angry German guy into a Hitler? I'm not entirely sure, but I don't think Baron Aloha is supposed to be that. Now, moving on to presentation, and I really love the presentation of this game. Like, it holds up remarkably well, even without the CRT filter, which I only found out after we streamed, but it does, the CRT filter, like, gives a little bit of a fuzz to it, like you're playing it on a CRT screen, that is more probably in line with what the devs were seeing when they were actually making the game and how they expected it to look. But even without that, like, it looks really great. Are the polygons really big and sharp? Yeah, of course they are. It's a 1995 game, like, what are you expecting? But I think the stylization of the game, it helps it to hold up more than something that was aiming for a more realistic look. When I was doing a little bit of reading into the background of the game and the development of the game, and I found this really neat interview between, hi, give me a second here, between, Gunpei Yokoi, who was the designer of the Game Boy, and Yukihito Morikawa, who was the head of Mumu, which is what Ultra Studios ended up becoming later on. And they talk about a lot of things. It's a very interesting article. I'll link it in the description. But one of the things that they were talking about is this split between, like, do you want a more stylized look for your game, or do you want a more photorealistic look for your game? And both of them come down very strongly on the side of more stylization, in that it holds up a little bit better, and it gives the players, like, space to put their imagination into things and kind of build the shape of things a little bit in their minds. And I think that that does really Hell, everything in this game is super charming looking. Like, it just looks so great. And it's an interesting contrast to the game's precursor, which was Geograph Seal, which was developed by Excel. And, like, all the elements of what would be Jumping Flash are there, but without that kind of polish that Ultra was putting on it to give it that character and give it that charm. And it's like, yeah, you can see this was probably a fun game, and it was very ahead of its time. Like, it was a pace setter, I suppose, you know, because it would become Jumping Flash in the future, but like, it does lack that little bit of oomph in character. And also, I feel like you see that with Exact's later title, which is a Ghost in the Shell tie-in for PS1, where you could see where they're going with the gameplay in Jumping Flash. You could see like what that could become in a tougher type of environment, tougher gameplay setting, and it's really, really cool looking. I want to point that out. It looks like it's a really interesting game, but like, it's not really all that charming, and it looks like it's leaning into not a more realistic look, but a much more detailed look, and I think that does harm it a little bit in the age. When we've got games now that could pull off that look very easily, but that they struggled with the PS1's hardware. So that was really interesting. Another thing that I came across while I was doing research on this, that the inspiration for Jumping Flash was borrowed from Osamu Tezuka's animation Jumping, his 1984 animation, and now I couldn't find a source for that particular tidbit. It was on the fandom page. It's interesting, that whole fandom page has got a lot of really interesting and cool details on it, and while I couldn't like source that down to an article, I did watch the video, and like, you can clearly see how somebody would see that animation and say like, yeah, let's turn that into Jumping Flash, because the feel of movement, both when the first person character of the animation is like running along, but also the way when they jump and they look down, it's very, very similar to how Jumping Flash moves and how it feels with the bob of the camera. And that's like, it's really, really interesting. One of the things I really liked about doing this particular project was I got to read like all of these neat little tidbits here and there, and it's like, it's super cool. So yeah, like, I love the presentation of this game. I think it stands up really, really well, and even like without nostalgia goggles, like, it looks good. Does it look as good as something nowadays? It depends on what game you're talking about, I suppose, but like, it does look, I think, honestly good, and plays honestly good. Moving into the streamability and replayability, this was interesting from a streaming standpoint. I mentioned in the previous video that I do like things that are a bit longer, and this was just one session, but I have to say, like, if it's gonna be short, I would rather that it was just one and done than something that's like in the in-betweenies, like 1.5 sessions or 2 sessions. Like, if it's gotta be short, let it be one, and that was perfect for this. I really like the fact that chat was very invested in the game, and there was a bit of tension there, because like, I'm not the greatest player in the world, and I did struggle with some of the things, so like the Shadow Boss and like the Baron. So being able to pull off those fights felt really, really good, to be able to do it in front of people. That was super cool. So that aspect of it was great. The replayability, and honestly, pretty high. Like, I jumped into it. I was just going to do a little bit of B-roll this morning. I had already recorded a full play of the game, and I didn't need everything. There were just like some little odds and ends that I wanted to grab, and I jumped in and I got my odds and ends, and then I was like, no, let's just keep playing. And I played through the entire game again. And then when I found out that I could actually look up and down, and I was like, well, I should get some footage of me looking up and down, because I'm definitely going to talk about that in the video here right now. And I played through half the game again, just because I was having a really, really good time with it. This is something that I could totally see myself going back to, like, not all the time, of course, but like something that I could enjoy going back to without too much difficulty. The fact that it is a relatively short game, the fact that it is very compact in what it's asking from you, and the fact that like I could just do, you know, stage 3, or I could just do stage 4 and have that be my session. Like, yeah, I think I could easily see myself playing this again and again over the years. Like, it's really, really good, and it holds up. So that brings us to our takeaway, and I want to give it a green circle, but I really do think it's a yellow square. And my reasoning is thus: even though it is really good, and even though it does hold up really well, and I do feel like it's got replayability, it is still at heart, it's a very, very simple game. And I feel like, even in reading interviews that I did in my research, like even the dev team felt like there were things they wanted to do with the game that they just didn't have the ability at the time, things that they went back to in Jumping Flash 2, and you know, adding a little bit more animation, adding a little bit more depth to the stages, and to the enemy sets, because the enemies are, as much as I love them, as much as they are super cute, they are, you know, they are really, really simple. But the dev team kind of went back and addressed things that they wanted to add in Jumping Flash 1, and they put them in Jumping Flash 2. I would love to play that with the stream, but it also features, they've got this effeminate guy, like giant effeminate guy, Captain Kabuki, and very clearly intended to be as a joke, and you could maybe see why I might struggle with that a little bit, but like Jumping Flash feels like it's the egg of what they wanted to do, and so I don't feel like I can quite give it the green circle, but it is a very, very strong yellow square. It's something that I could easily recommend to folks. They definitely play this if you're interested in a little bit of the history, but also play this if you're just interested in a really fun game, because it's honestly a really fun game. And I think that has to do it here for us get this go about. I've just rabbited on and rabbited on and robbited on, perhaps. That was a bad joke, but yeah, but let's wrap it up here. So from me, Disco, here in Tokyo, to all of you out there, wherever you may happen to be, thank you, arigato, sayonara, see you, and ciao.